Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really powerful narrative journey by putting two ancient texts side by side. We're looking at source material that bridges the absolute, crushing depths of human despair with the profound and seemingly impossible heights of healing. We're going to examine some key excerpts from the Book of Lamentations and the Gospel of Matthew to see exactly how ancient writers framed both total societal collapse and ultimate restoration. Let's get right into it.
Right off the bat, I want you to notice this stark contrast. In the Book of Lamentations, we see total systemic collapse. The infrastructure has so thoroughly broken down that infants are literally fainting away. Now counter that with the Gospel of Matthew on the right, which depicts this incredible, authoritative restoration where the sick are entirely cured. Basically, we're looking at a masterclass in ancient literary contrast, absolute powerlessness on one hand and absolute authority on the other.
So let's start with Section 1. The depths of desolation, falling into the ruins.
We're kicking things off with a steep descent, observing exactly how these ancient writers process the visceral, absolute ruin of their society. When you read Lamentations, you aren't just reading a dry history book. You're reading a real-time account of utter devastation. Fortresses are torn down. Kings are brought to the ground in dishonor. To really ground ourselves in this ancient context, look at the mourning presented in the text. The old men of daughter Zion are sitting in absolute silence, throwing dust on their heads and wearing sackcloth. Now, sackcloth was this coarse, dark cloth woven from goat's hair. It doesn't breathe, it constantly scratches the skin, and it served as a harsh, inescapable physical reminder of their internal agony. When the respected elders of a city are sitting silently in the dirt wearing this stuff, yeah, it means the very structure of society has completely evaporated.
Right in the middle of describing all this ruin, the writer just pauses. It's an agonizing moment where they stop the historical recounting to ask, "To what can I liken or compare you, O daughter Jerusalem?" The writer is desperately searching the known world for any parallel to this unprecedented suffering, basically asking, what example can I even show you for your comfort? And the answer, implied by the vastness of their downfall, which the text compares to the size of the sea itself, is nothing. There is literally no comparison.
And here's where the text pushes us to the absolute rock bottom of human despair. The writer doesn't just talk about the loss of grand buildings or military defeats, they use the ultimate tragedy. Innocent children and infants starving in the open squares of the city, asking their mothers for grain in vain and breathing their last. It is incredibly heavy, I know, but it's necessary to understand the text's baseline. This is a portrait of a community that has absolutely nothing left.
Moving on to Section 2. False Hope and Real Grief, Leadership in Collapse.
So, while we remain down here in the heavy depths of this narrative, the text shifts focus a bit. It doesn't just mourn the collapse, it actually points a direct finger at the failed leadership that made the crisis worse. The source explicitly states that the prophets, the very people meant to guide society and speak the truth, instead offered misleading, false, and specious visions. They completely failed at their primary job. They didn't lay bare the people's guilt to avert their tragic downfall. Instead, they just offered comforting lies instead of the hard truths that were actually required to save the city.
Okay, so here's the pivot point of our story. Having hit this rock bottom and having realized their leaders failed them while their city is in ruins, the text commands the people to take action. It tells them to rise up in the shrill of the night, at the beginning of every watch, to let their tears flow like a torrent, and to desperately demand divine intervention for the lives of their perishing little ones. It's a massive pivot from passive suffering to an active, desperate cry for order in the middle of all this chaos.
Which brings us to Section 3, a surprising act of faith, the pivot to restoration.
Now we're shifting gears, moving from the despair of Lamentations over to the Gospel of Matthew, beginning our ascent into a narrative of structured healing. And what's fascinating is that this restoration starts with a completely unexpected character. Instead of an elder of Zion or some expected religious figure, a Roman centurion approaches Jesus in Capernaum. Remember, a centurion is an occupying military commander, literally the enemy, yet he approaches with a humble plea for his paralyzed, suffering servant. He shows this extraordinary belief in an unseen authority, even explicitly telling Jesus he isn't worthy to have him under his roof.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates his logic. He maps his military mindset directly onto the realm of physical healing. He's essentially saying, hey, I'm a guy subject to authority, and I have soldiers subject to me. I tell one to go, and he goes. Therefore, you don't even need to be physically present. You just need to issue the command. He recognizes an absolute authority in Jesus that perfectly mirrors the absolute powerlessness we just saw back in Lamentations.
According to the text, Jesus is absolutely amazed by this reasoning. He uses the moment to declare something super radical to the people following him. He says that many will come from the east and the west to join the heavenly banquet, while the expected children of the kingdom will be driven into the outer darkness. It's a massive inversion of expectations regarding who actually understands true authority and true healing.
All right, section 4, the power of a word, authority over affliction.
Look at this incredible contrast, completing the reversal of the hopelessness we analyzed earlier. On one hand, we have the false, helpless prophets of the ruined city who offered nothing but misleading portents while children fainted in the streets. Counter this with the decisive, effective authority of Jesus in Matthew. Jesus simply says to the centurion, "As you have believed, let it be done for you." And the servant is healed at that very hour, entirely from a distance. One is a word of false hope, the other is a word of actual, manifested healing. And that leads us right into section 5, healing the afflicted, a cascade of restoration.
From the centurion's servant onward, the narrative pace noticeably quickens. We're given consecutive, undeniable moments of complete restoration. The writer is basically piling on the evidence of restored order. We see the staggering breadth of healing that spans every type of interaction. First, the distant command for the centurion's servant. Next, Jesus enters Peter's house, sees his mother-in-law with a fever, and heals her with a simple physical touch. Then, when evening comes, many possessed by demons are brought to him, and he drives out the spirits with a single word. This sweeping authority over distance, physical illness, and spiritual affliction provides the ultimate solution to the systemic despair we explored at the beginning of our explainer.
The text concludes this sequence by anchoring all of these miraculous events as the direct fulfillment of the prophet Isaiah, stating, "He took away our infirmities and bore our diseases." This is presented as the definitive answer. Remember that agonizing question asked back in the ruins of Jerusalem when the writer of Lamentations cried out, "For great as the sea is your downfall, who can heal you?" Well, the text of Matthew answers that direct question by presenting a figure with absolute, unyielding authority over all affliction.
As we wrap up this explainer, we're left to ponder this incredible narrative arc. We've seen exactly how ancient writers navigated the extreme, almost unbearable tension between total societal devastation and profound miraculous authority. And honestly, it leaves us with a deeply human question. When our own structures fail us, and when grief feels as deep as the sea, what are the enduring sources of order, truth, and healing that we seek out? Thank you so much for exploring these fascinating ancient texts with me today.